Hello everybody. So this video is entitled KULR Stock. They're all about batteries now, in parenthesis, plus Bitcoin, because you may remember I got into the stock after the first DAT crash, like the start of a DAT crash. You remember you had Metaplanet go crazy 6-7 months ago, and KULR as well had went crazy. The stock traded close to $40. It crashed, and I got in about this at about 5. A few shares at $4, $5. So I'm a little down on the stock. But of course, I was very interested in the stock back then because they had an ATM authorization and they had a really good MNAV and they could really have accumulated Bitcoin. Now, unfortunately, the DAT crash happened and this stock dropped, but notably, it dropped way less than the pure play Bitcoin Treasury company. In fact, KULR never identified as a Bitcoin Treasury company. They identified as a Bitcoin plus company, or a company that believes in investing in Bitcoin, the profits, when those profits come to KULR, which they're very, very far from. They're a long way from profits. In that sector, in the advanced, super high-tech battery sector, none of those folks are profitable. I'll compare it to Enovix and Amprius. None of those folks are profitable, but they took advantage of a very high valuation to buy more than 1,000 Bitcoin, 1,085 Bitcoin actually, which they still have on the balance sheet to this day. And thanks to that, this stock looks very, very cheap thanks to the Bitcoin that they have on the balance sheet. So I'll get to that in a second. What do they do now? So this stock at one point, I think the market got confused. Well, I didn't, but most of the people who followed this stock got confused when he started buying Bitcoin and they sold it off. And so I think Michael Moe, what he's trying to do, he's trying to have a razor sharp focus on batteries and on producing the batteries. He's trying to follow in the footsteps of the peer group, which would be Enovix and Amprius, which are billion-dollar market cap companies. He's trying to position the company with KULR, trying to position the company as this battery pure play, super high-tech battery pure play company, which I think he's doing successfully. Because if you look at the stock price, we are up a good 40 to even more than 40% from the lows, up from the lows. Actually, if you look at the 1 month performance until now of KULR, it's been nothing short of amazing. And if you look at the earnings, the Q1 that they just reported, of course, they lost money. They lost about $7 million in operating loss. But the headline was much higher. The headline was something like 30%. 30 million loss. So 28 million was it. Why was that? Because of the mark-to-market accounting of Bitcoin. So the market reacted very poorly, thinking, oh, they've lost all of that money because of mark-to-market accounting in Bitcoin. But they didn't sell the Bitcoin. So actually, the loss has been reducing. The loss quarter over quarter actually reduced by more than 20%. So they're slowly, racing towards, well, they're not racing, but they're slowly advancing towards, operating leverage and towards positive profitability, positive cash flow at some point. But we're probably at least a year and a half away from that, which again, for that sector is pretty normal. Now, let me just say, I don't do pre-revenue companies. I would not be interested in this company if it were not for the BTC bag. As long as the BTC bag stays, I'm staying with this company and I'm not taking my loss. And I think it's not going to be a loss for a very long time because I think this company is going to make a comeback because of battery business. Because the battery business is very hot and this company is trading at such a tremendous discount to its peers. Michael Moe talking about a shell of a company not even the size of KULR in the private market getting sold for 50 million. He talked about that on the call. I really think this company is not being valued up to its full potential. In fact, if you look at when this company IPO'd, so it IPO'd in the quote-unquote hype period of 2021, it IPO'd at a little bit more than $15. This company went public at a little more than $15. And of course, this company back then was nowhere near where it is today. So it's one of these companies you could say that IPO'd perhaps a little too early. But again, if you compare it to the peers, if you compare it to Enovix or Amprius, I cannot understand this, especially when you consider Amprius 5x'd, right? Amprius 5x'd in the past year. Guess what Amprius does? Amprius does batteries for drones. Batteries for drones. Guess what KULR does? KULR One Air, KULR One Space. KULR does batteries for drones and batteries for space. Made in the USA, with USA manufacturing, with USA supply chain. They're working on a facility on which they hope to have 10,000 batteries manufactured per quarter pretty soon in the second half. They're investing heavily in the manufacturing. They're in the manufacturing phase and they're ramping their batteries, and they have a lot of government customers. They sell to, government, NASA, defense contractors, USA supply chain, and very, very high performance batteries. If you ask me, that's very similar to what Amprius does. Okay, Amprius has 90 million in sales. How many millions does KULR have in sales? KULR has 20 million in sales, right? And I'm using the run rate. I'm using the revenue run rate here. 20 million in sales. But KULR is enterprise value of 68 million. How do I get to that enterprise value of 68 million? Because I had the cash. They have 19 million of cash on the balance sheet, and then they have 90 million of Bitcoin. The market is giving them no credit for their $90 million worth of Bitcoin that they have on the balance sheet. And I count it as cash in this spreadsheet. So actually, you get to a company who is a ridiculous 68 million. So it's a micro cap. This is a micro cap. There is no institutional following whatsoever on this stock. KULR did the conference call on his own. This is the smallest micro cap that I've ever owned, of course, and that I've ever seen, really. And yet we're still trading on an EV over GP over RG of 0.12, which in my spreadsheet is dirt cheap. But I don't think this company should trade on revenue. I don't think this company, I think this company should trade a little above the Bitcoin, which is roughly what they are doing right now. So that's good. But I think this company should trade on its potential, on its ability to actually manufacture batteries in the US and manufacture high margin, very high performance batteries in the United States, a little bit like Amprius is doing. Enovix, a little bit of a different strategy. They're manufacturing, they're trying to ramp one of their manufacturing facilities, trying to manufacture stuff in Asia. But Enovix is also very telling. 34 million in sales, 1.55 billion in market cap. So you're talking about a company, KULR here, which is between 20 and 50 times too cheap on a market cap basis. Now, of course, if you get into the nitty gritty, you may say, oh, they don't have the same tech. It's not as good. Well, that's where the risk comes in. Because when I go on the KULR's website, this is not my field, right? But when I go on the KULR's website, when I see what they do, when I see how long they've been working with NASA, when I see their history of testing batteries for NASA, when I see that they emerge in California, they were originally in San Diego, when I see who they work with, when I see their partners, when I see that they sell stuff to Lockheed Martin, and the Department of Defense, I have no reason to assume that their space batteries and their KULR batteries are not nearly as good as the competition. So this stock is left for dead. I'm afraid. I think the stock is too cheap, and I'm not willing to give up on it on this one, especially when they're beginning to ramp revenue and they doubled the sales, right? They grew at 98% last year, and there's no prediction from analysts, so I'm going to assume they at least grew at 98% this year for revenue, but I think they could grow higher than 98% when you're starting from such a low base. When you're starting from 5 million a quarter, you can grow much faster, especially as they're going to ramp and really expanding their factory, building their factory in the United States. So, in a nutshell, I don't understand this stock. I think it's too cheap. I think it's ignored. And I think that the Bitcoin gives a margin of safety, an important margin of safety. And imagine, by the way, if Bitcoin goes up just, back of a napkin math, if Bitcoin goes up just 60%, then the entire company is explained by Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin only needs to go up 60% for the entire value of a company to be explained by Bitcoin. So, and this stock doesn't trade on Bitcoin anymore. It doesn't trade related to Bitcoin anymore. Oh, and they're doing a pivot, by the way, and they had said that on prior calls as well. But they think their applications, their batteries, they think could have strong applications for AI and humanoids. And right, why do we talk about AI? Well, if we send AI data centers into space, perhaps space batteries are going to be a big deal. And humanoids, of course, if you're going to have military applications for humanoids, if you need to go in tough environments, their KULR One batteries could be a big deal. And I think there's going to be multiple suppliers of these batteries. You know, Department of Defense, they have an incentive to not just have one supplier. They want to have multiple suppliers. They want to diversify their supply chain, diversify their supplier. Anyways, I was very pleased with the call. Go ahead, listen to the call. Listen to Michael Moe. He seemed very focused, very hyper focused on growing this business. And I still like this stock mainly because of the margin of safety that the Bitcoin provides. So this was not investment advice. This is not financial advice. This is only entertainment. I'm hoping you were entertained. Please like, please subscribe, follow me on Patreon, follow me on X. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.